Good afternoon. Welcome to the board meeting of the Teachers Retirement Board for January 18th, 2024. I'll start by calling the roll. Brian Bergen.
Brian Berge, representing Mayor Adams, present.
Thomas Brown.
Present. Good afternoon, Patricia.
Good afternoon. Ephraim Zachary.
Present virtually due to an illness.
Thank you. Allison Hirsch.
Present on behalf of Controller Lander.
David Gazansky.
Present.
Victoria Lee. Present. We have a quorum. And the next item on the agenda is an update from TRS operations given to us by Vita Hanwar.
Thank you, Patricia. Good afternoon, everyone. The 1099 forms for tax year 2023 are being mailed in January. TRS will notify the affected members by email with their 1099 forms are available for viewing on the TRS website. On December 28th, TRS filed its 2023 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report with the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association. The report is also available for viewing on the TRS website. In an effort to reduce operational cost as well as environmental impact, TRS is adopting an electronic first communication strategy. Our first focus is to reduce the amount of correspondence that we physically mail, and we have stopped mailing certain confirmation letters and notifications. All correspondence is available for members to view securely on our website, and we alert members by email whenever a new letter has been posted. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is an update from the actuary.
Good afternoon. Last year, I was asked to continue the tradition of having the actuary update the board on fiscal notes that impact TRS. And so we're in a new legislative session. So I thought I'd first start and quickly recap the three bills signed by the governor last month. As Chapter 711, the dual membership bill that I'm sure you're all familiar with. Chapter 716, the OWBPA, Older Workers Benefit Protection Act, that changed the 5% actuarial reduction to 3% for certain death benefits. And then Chapter 717, the reinstatement of the reserve transfers for teachers who move back and forth between the city and state systems. Of the three I mentioned, the one that will give your staff the most work is probably the second one, the OWBPA, because that's retroactive to July 1st, 2021. So potentially any death benefits paid for members 61 and older would have to be looked at again. And if the 5% reduction is used in those calculations, there'll need to be a true up with a 3%. I sent Valerie, our office sent Valerie an email or a letter, a memo describing, kind of giving examples of the recalculation, and our office is available to help and provide assistance if you need any in reviewing cases that we need to recalculate.
Thank you.
Then, yeah.
Is that retroactive date the same as the date on which the actuary's office began costing that method in the city's contributions? Okay.
Okay, so my predecessor included the cost of that provision starting in that fiscal year that started. So it was the 22 fiscal year. So it starts July 1st, 2021. So the bill was made retroactive to that to be consistent with that. No, so new fiscal notes. So one has gone out already, and it happens to be a TRS fiscal note. And it impacted a single member, and it was included in your board packets. I included it not to necessarily talk about this fiscal note, but to point out the new format of the fiscal notes going out this year. So if you look at that fiscal note, in the past, the fiscal notes, the costs were described in narrative format. So if it impacted one member, if it impacted retirees, a closed tier, an open tier, we would put different paragraphs describing what the cost is. And you kind of had to be an actuary or someone, at least a finance person, to understand how to put the different pieces together. And it was hard for us to write those paragraphs. And it was hard for the readers to kind of absorb that. So the goal for this year is to present every single fiscal note in the same format. So the first page is always going to be a 25-year projection of the impact on the employer contribution rate. So even though this was a single person fiscal note that had one number in fiscal year 2026, we showed the full 25 years, and you see a bunch of zeros and all the years after 2026. So the reader can quickly see what's the impact and not really need to understand. They know there's a one-time cost. In other fiscal notes, you'll see the cost going up over time, and you'll get the idea for the trend. In other ones, if there's a lesser cost for the newer tiers, you'll actually see tier shifting in the cost, where it's more expensive now, and then the delta will get cheaper in future years. So it felt like this was a cleaner way of presenting it and something that people can understand. Go ahead.
As an avid reader of fiscal notes, Mark, I want to make sure I understand the new table, which I have enjoyed. Does the entry for each year represent the delta from the baseline of what the contributions would have been absent that bill?
Exactly.
So it's cumulative then. So if you add up all the numbers, it is
Well,
not
it's
cumulative?
each row. Yeah, if you add up all the numbers, that's the total increase, right? And so if you look at any particular row, that tells you what that fiscal year's increase would have been. And then on the second page, we go and we list the actuarial numbers that went developed the first. So you'll see on the second page, the delta and the present value benefits. So if you took all the deltas on the first page, extended them to perpetuity past the 25 years, took their present value, then you would get the present value that shows up on the second page as the delta present value.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I guess maybe it'll help for my own mind. If I see like a table of 25-year projections, and in each row, there's an entry of 1 million. Is it accurate to say that over those 25 years, there'll be a cumulative increase of 25 million?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm making sure that I know that that's kind of an elementary
Yeah.
comprehension question, but I get asked a lot of questions about what fiscal notes mean, and I just want to make sure I have a baseline on this new format.
No, you've got it.
Really acing my reading comp 101.
So that was the first change. So one of the things I like about this, regardless of the format of the fiscal note, so you have 5 fiscal notes in front of you, you can just line them all up side by side and compare each one across the board and see the financial impact without trying to, in your mind, figure out, well, this one's amortized over 5 years and this one's amortized over 17 years. It's all right there on the first page. So that was part one of we made 3 changes. So that was the first one, the new format. The second change was a new process. So in the past, we would wait until the preliminary contribution letter went out for the current fiscal year. So we do our preliminary contribution letters, publish those in March, and then all the fiscal notes would start going out after March based on those final numbers. But we realized that when you do a fiscal note, it's really the difference between 2 numbers, the baseline number and the new number, the new result based on the proposed legislation. And then we round it to the nearest million, we round it to the nearest billion sometimes, and little tiny discrepancies in the data don't impact, they're not material in the overall results. We said, well, instead of waiting till everything's done in March, if we take the snapshot of the data as of December 31st, which just ended, and use that as our basis for the fiscal note, it doesn't matter that we fly spec some of the retiree benefits, maybe tweak some benefits. When we take the delta, it's not going to make a material impact on the fiscal note. So what that means is now we can start producing the fiscal notes about 2 to 3 months quicker than we've done in prior years. So in the past, you would get this rush of fiscal notes in March and April. We expect to release them mostly in the end of January and February this year. So we're on track to start shooting out all these fiscal notes. We've already received like 50 or so requests. And in the next several weeks, you start getting this deluge of fiscal notes coming out of our office months early. And the last change, and Liz, if you could share the document. So in the past, when we released a fiscal note, it was always in PDF format. And then the Legislative Bill Drafting Commission would somehow convert that into text format, 72 characters wide, so they could append it to the bill. It would have to be justified and all that. And so we always took great care not to put in fancy graphics to explain things because we knew those couldn't get converted and put into the bill. Now we're creating these 25-year tables on the front page, and we want to make it a little easier to incorporate those into the statute to attach them to the bill. So one of the actuaries wrote a program that takes each fiscal note and converts it into the proper 72 character wide format that's justified how it should be. So this is fiscal note 1. So now when we release the fiscal notes, we provide 2 versions, a PDF version and a text version of the same fiscal note. So this is the text version of the one that's in your board packets, and it's actually kind of visually appealing. You know, it's got all the spaces, everything lines up, and even though it's in text format. Now, one thing we noticed that, and by the way, this is more complicated than you think. This took 300 lines of code to write this program. Because you have to decide where to put, because everything's right, fully justified, so you gotta decide where to put the extra spaces and how to line up the columns. And if you got 5 retirement systems, you gotta get all 5 columns to line up. So we were so excited to see how it worked, and we saw that the text got attached to the bill. And when we looked at what was attached, it wasn't what we gave them. We did a digital comparison, and some of the spaces were slightly different. And then we noticed in what was attached to the bill, the last 0 was missing. And so it does not a material impact, because whether for 2049 you have a 0 or a blank space, it's still implying 0. But we're reaching out to the LBD and let them know, you know, we're sending you both versions. We're sending you the PDF and a programmatically text-friendly version of that same bill. So to the extent you don't have to type, you can use that text version. Which hopefully will speed up their process a little bit and make it less error-free. So that, you know, that's the end of my update. I'm happy to answer questions. Go ahead.
I was curious, does your office process fiscal notes just straight in order of submission?
We take requests to prioritize them. So occasionally we'll process them, we'll put them in the queue, and we'll work on them in order of submission. But if someone calls up and says, we need this right away, we'll bump it up into the queue, depending kind of the urgency of it.
Okay. And on this particular fiscal note, was the difference between the PV and the one-time amortization payment just a function of like an interest lag, like
Yes.
1-year interest lag? Okay.
Exactly. And this one was a simple one. It was a 1-person one, so it was easy to get it out the door first and then test the process. And there were also people calling, asking to accelerate this one as well.
Hey, Marek, Effie has a question.
Yes, Abby.
Please unmute yourself, Effie.
Thank you. If he's actually here virtually, Merrick, a couple of quick questions just on the process, just to understand it better. When you use present value, do you use one interest rate as the discounted rate, or do you use the whole yield curve, and depending how far out you go, you have different rates for each year?
We do not use the yield curve. So the yield curve is mostly for corporate pension work. In public sector, it's common to use one discount rate. So we use 7% for the entire, for all years for the present value.
So we're using 7%. Okay. What is it usually based on? Like inflation or Fed rates or what?
Yeah, well, it's set in statute. So the 7% is set in statute. So we have to use 7%. But it's used as a building block approach, inflation, an estimate of inflation, an estimate of the real growth. So it's kind of validated, smell tested, but it's in statute. So we have to use what's in statute.
I understand. Also, do we take any kind of actuarial life term expectation or any kind of like potential death benefits to a spouse or anything like that? We'll calculate the present value now.
Yes, we take into account every cash flow we know of. So whatever liability it is to the member, whether it's a refund of contributions or a death benefit or a continuing joint survivor benefit to the spouse, that's all included in the cash flow projections, which then get discounted.
All right, last question. Are there any circumstances under which you refuse such a request?
Yes. So if we have an in-house attorney general counsel who's an expert on the pension laws impacting the plans, and if a request comes in where we think it violates the Constitution, where it diminishes someone's benefits, we'll reject it and not perform the fiscal note.
All right, thank you very much for answering my questions.
So my plan going forward, like for next month, with any new TRS fiscal notes, I'll just submit them to the board. We already copy staff, but I'll submit it to the board as an agenda item and briefly talk about any future fiscal notes, if that's acceptable. Sure.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So next on the agenda is the executive director's report. And first on the report is the matter of the next meeting, which has been determined to be February 15th, 2024. It's the third Thursday of the month. Next is the resolution for the CWA union increases for covered TRS employees.
Please skip to the resolve.
Resolved that the board approves a modification to the fiscal year budget 2024 to increase such budget by $290,996 to fund compensation increases for eligible staff required by the new CWA collective bargaining agreements.
Patricia will be voting on the resolution entitled CWA Union Increases for Covered TRS Employees. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Great, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed say nay. Any abstentions? And this resolution has passed. Thank you.
Next is the attendance at a conference. Following resolution is presented for consideration and possible adoption. Resolved that the trustees of the Teachers Retirement Board hereby approve the attendance and participation of the executive director and or her designees and any interested trustee at the NASP New York 2026 Annual Wall Street Hall of Fame on February 6, 2024.
Thank you, Patricia. We're going to be voting now on the resolution attendance at conference. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second by Effie Zachary.
Thank you, Effie. And any discussion? All those in favor of this resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Let the record show that this resolution has passed. Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is the calendar.
Please waive the reading of the calendar.
Thank you. You all received an electronic version of the calendar, so we can just move to voting on the calendar.
Thank you. So we're going to be voting for the calendar. All those in, oh, do I have a motion?
So moved.
So
Is
moved.
there a second?
Second.
Great. All those in favor of accepting the calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say
Aye.
nay. Any abstentions? Let the record show that the calendar has been approved. Thank you.
So we don't have any other business, and do we have questions from the public? Seeing none.
Guess this is the time that I will entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
It's been motioned, and do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, thank you. All those in favor of going into executive session, please say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? And we're now in executive session. We're now back in public session. Welcome back, everybody. We'll have a readout from Ron Swingle.
Good afternoon. In executive session of the January 2024 board meeting, an IT presentation was made and we received an update on an audit item. Details to be made public at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Guess we've finished our business. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. And is there a second?
Second.
Second by Effie.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say
Aye.
nay. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.